Hi, I'm Brandy Vallance. Welcome to an informal author chat with myself and Evangeline Denmark. We are just hanging out, having a wild goose chase and roundtable discussion. And I have made a pot of tea for this occasion. I have a teapot here that my grandmother bought for me, and I am drinking Yorkshire Gold tea. I also have a glass of water out of my Victorian glass. And what are you drinking, my friends?
I am laughing because I am so not fancy. Here is my jug of Crystal Light.
And she's completely lying. She's very fancy. She just put on pretenses for the sake of our conversation.
Well, according to my boys, I've been told I'm fancy. Whatever that means to teenage boys today, I've been told I'm fancy.
She's very fancy, a fancy writer, fancy person, and one of the best people that I know. We have known each other for quite a few years. I met her in a bookstore at a writer's group, and I remember casually browsing the shelves thinking, what a cool person she is, and I really want to be her friend.
That's the best place to meet someone. And I remember reading a very early version of The Cover Deep, and loving Bianca from the very first page. And so that's my kind of like my earliest memory.
We were at Montague's Tea House, right? Getting to know each other. And
I had read it. No, you sent it to me. I had read it. I think I remember meeting at Montague's, but I had read it before then. Because you sent it. I think you emailed it to me.
Mm-hmm.
But
well,
yeah,
that's awesome. We've had tons of laughter and interesting conversations ever since, and we're about to have another one. So glad
hopefully
you all can join us, where this could just be stammering about into complete lunacy. So
yes,
everybody is welcome to become voyeurs into our secret worlds of insanity, right?
Right. Well, for right now, anyway.
Okay. All right. Well, I would like to start out, and let's just talk about our personal favorite scenes of our novels that we have. So you go ahead and talk.
Oh, I get to go first. You said you were going first.
No, you're the guest. You get to go first.
Oh my gosh, you know what we don't have is our books to hold up. Silly us. So my book is Curio. It's a young adult steampunk fantasy, and my favorite scene in there is a scene where the hero kind of he flies. He has a steam jetpack thing, and my heroine is in trouble, and she's already kind of fought off the bad guy, but now she's like trapped in her room at his estate. And so Blaze shows up with kind of ulterior motives. He's trying to negotiate a kind of a hostage exchange. So he's kind of going to take her hostage, but he's a nice guy, so he's doing it nicely. But it ends up that she needs to get out. So they kind of help each other. But it's a really fun scene because she gets to fly with him within his steam pack, and it's very romantic, and they're kind of just getting to know each other, but the sparks are flying. So
that is one of my favorite scenes of the entire book, and I do love Evangeline's book, Curio. And we have this weird thing going on because I always call her Evangeline, and I don't know why, and her name is Evangeline. For some reason,
you're the only one who's allowed to do that. I'm just so used to it from you that it doesn't bother me at all. It's just part of who you are.
I guess it's just I have to bring the Victorian aspect to even the way, of how I call my friends. So
right. You do your thing. It's fine.
All right. So my favorite scenes, Within the Veil just came out about a week ago. I have so many favorite scenes in that novel. But in particular, the cave scene is a definite favorite. It's after Faya and Alistair have been running from the gypsies, and they have to take some shelter. And a lot of really special, intimate moments go on between them. And I got to deepen their characters a lot through the conversations that they had and some different things that happened. So that's a definite favorite for me. And then there is a cabin scene that is also a favorite for me. But so many. I love Faya's just passionate gypsy nature, and you would never be bored if Faya was your best friend. So that's that. And then,
That's true. All you have to say is cave scene, and I get a big smile on my
yeah,
face.
I know.
A good scene. So it's the cabin scene.
Mhm. And in the cover deep, there is a garden scene in Jerusalem between Bianca and Paul, and that one was so much fun to write. And that was sort of just getting really deep into their love story right there. So I really enjoyed that. And then there is a scene toward the end, and I just call it the snow scene because Paul is back in London and he's a little depressed about something that's gone on, and he is lamenting the snow in London. And I love
Painting the snow.
that. And his brother showing up and all of that. So those are a few of my favorite scenes. But
I love it. Your weather symbolism is rubbing off on me, and now I've got this whole kind of weather related story in my head that I'm working on. So that's what happens when you're in critique group with people for long enough, is that you learn from them and you start to pick up not necessarily the way they do it, but you see the importance of different things that maybe aren't your strong point. Like, one of our critique partners is really great with dialogue. You're really great with symbolism and atmosphere, and so it's fun to be able to learn from others.
yeah, absolutely. And I have a bit of a problem with I'll call it a problem with the wind.
Problem. An addiction.
Yeah, an addiction. The mournful sounds of the wind and
The wind.
yeah. And if you read any of my books, you'll understand why, because I am a very atmospheric writer, and I think it's just because I love it so much. I love that, just that sense of, all the elements, and I love being able to portray my characters' emotions and put them in the weather. That's one of the things that I do from a writer's perspective. So, tons of fun for me. And
Yeah.
since we're talking about setting, we asked a few people some questions that they might want us to answer. And one of them was for us just to talk about our setting and our world building and how we do some of that.
Okay. I think you get to go first because I went first on the last one.
All right. Well, my setting, I always start out and just know, okay, I want to write a story set in Scotland or in England or Ohio, England, and the Holy Land, something like that. I do
And the moon.
yeah. I do tons and tons of research, an insane amount of research. I have notebooks upon notebooks and just so many little details. And I think if you're a historical writer, one of the most important things that you can do is just really try to immerse yourself in the time period and bring out the details of the smells and the sensory things. And especially the textures, I believe, makes that extremely real. So I do a lot of talking to myself when I'm writing. I do a lot of, walking through my scenes and thinking, what is she feeling right now? What sort of texture is the cloth? And what are the sounds? And the sounds in Victorian London are very different from the sounds that we hear every day. So sometimes I even go on YouTube and I have watched a couple of university videos about the sounds of 19th century Paris, and then I'll incorporate that into a particular scene. So
Yeah, I've seen those videos before, and I have wondered, like, where, other than YouTube, where you get your sources. How do you search for, say you're gonna look up the Royal Mile, that's in the beginning of when Within the Veil. What do you do? Do you just Google the Royal Mile? Do you Google a time period? How do you start? Curious.
a lot of time I just Google and I end up stumbling upon these really archaic journals or firsthand accounts, and I'll pull details from there. But Within the Veil, so many of those locations I went to myself. So that really helped. Just some memories and some favorite things like that,
Yeah.
with all that I did. But so much of it is just strange little things that I stumble upon in my, 3 a.m. internet searches on really random sites that you would never know had existed. And Evangeline and I joke because I have no shame with my Google searches, and I just I fall into the rabbit holes of, 19th century, whatever, this thing, that thing, weirdness, which I think results in a lot of interesting things.
Every once in a while, I have to ask you to Google something for me because I'm afraid
Right.
of what I'll find. Apparently, that's what I'm doing wrong. I'm not Googling at 3 a.m. I'm sleeping because I don't know. I'm a person who sleeps.
Yeah. I don't sleep a lot, so I'm
Well,
reading.
yesterday I'm like working on this story that I'm working on. The one with the weather is set in Switzerland. So
Mhm.
yesterday I was watching Rick Steves videos on
Right.
Switzerland.
That
That
is
was fun.
something else that I'll do is I'll just watch crazy documentaries after documentaries.
Yeah,
hmm And with the
you're like,
meditation book that I've started writing a little bit with, there's some different actual footage and just anything related, travel videos, anything is just really helpful. And
yeah.
with the Cover Deep, something that was an invaluable resource for me is reading Mark Twain's The Innocents Abroad. And Mark
Mm,
Twain actually, he wrote his experiences and he wrote the smells and what the people were like and the traveling there. So that was a wonderful resource for that book. So what
cool.
about you? How do you approach setting?
How do I approach setting? You know, I kind of start with character and kind of build a setting for my character. So with Gray, like one of the first things I knew about Gray, the heroine in Curio, is that I wanted her to feel like she didn't fit in because this is a young adult book, but also I think everyone has had that feeling at some point. So I just really wanted to hit that hard with her character. So I kind of built the setting around that need for her not to fit in. So I made her tall and strong, and I had her, I set her down in this community of people who are kind of small and withered because of this disease that they have. And so from there, it kind of, went out and went out. I knew I wanted it to be set in Colorado because there's a kind of a mining backdrop going on, and obviously we had mining was a big reason that Colorado territory was settled. So, so I worked with that, and then Curio, the setting inside the curio cabinet, which is an enchanted place where all the figurines, little curios, have come to life. Um, that was a lot of fun. I kind of started and kind of imagined my dollhouse as a child, which was Victorian and, pink and had all the gingerbread trim and all of that, and sort of what the inside looked like. And, what if there was this land where everything kind of had that aesthetic, that kind of that, beautiful, decorated, meant to be beautiful, sort of atmosphere. And so I kind of created that in Curio, but of course, there's this underbelly of their society because there's people who serve them, and they're the talks, the clockwork people, and they're kind of subjugated. So there's kind of the nuts and bolts and gear type steampunk aesthetic as well, which kind of works with the Victorian elaborate stuff anyway. So I guess that's kind of my process, how I started anyway.
And what about the steampunk aspect? Is that something that you had to research heavily, or is that just something that you imagine because you have so many interesting contraptions and gadgets and things like that, which I absolutely love in that book.
The steampunk aspect, I was just a fan of steampunk. I really, I love reading it. I love the aesthetic, and it sort of just naturally came about with Curio, and then the publisher actually liked that and wanted me to add more. So I did get to add a little bit more. And yes, I do some research. I'm kind of not so great with science. So my husband and my oldest son helped me design the airship. It's called the Clang.
Mhm.
That's in Curio that they take up, and so that was it was a lot of fun to involve them in that process.
That's fantastic. So much fun. So another question that we had, and perhaps we should stick to the writer questions here in the beginning, was just talk about the struggle for mom and dad writers in making the time to write. So if I had anything to say about that, it was that I feel like we all have 24 hours in the day and something has to be given up if you really want to be a writer. And for me, it was sleep. And I would typically write, I wrote my first book between 10 a.m. and about 2 a.m. for many of those months, but I'm not entirely sure I would recommend that because with my high levels of caffeine, I think I kind of burn out my adrenal system and I crashed
Mhm.
after that first book and had a hard time. So I think now I try to write when my kids are in school, but it's a hard juggling thing. So do you have anything to speak?
Well, the first thing I always like to encourage, especially women, especially in the time of those heavy child rearing years, that whatever they're doing that is in their soul, that feeds their soul, and that is something that drives them, that it is important, that it is worth doing, and don't think that you're taking away from your family by taking the time to pursue that, because you're being the person that you need to be, and in turn that's good for your family, so don't feel guilty about it. As far as what I do, I also write, now that my kids are in school, I usually try and write when they're in school, and I try and ignore all the other stuff that I can do when they're home, like the laundry and the cleaning, which I don't do anyway, so um, but I try and write when they're in school, and then I think there's seasons. At least this is kind of the way I operate, or have fallen into this pattern. There's seasons of heavy writing, and seasons of promotion, and seasons when when stuff is going on. Your husband is lost his job, or your kid is sick, or whatever, and things fall apart, and you're the glue, and you're the one. Don't feel guilty about that either. Take your time to get things together and take care of what you need to get together. That's okay. um, so yeah, when I'm in a heavy writing season, then I get up in the morning and I write, and I end up like not showering till afternoon, and sometimes I write some more, and those are like long writing days, but they're good days.
Mhm.
And yeah, maybe I gain like 10, 15 pounds a month because I'm sitting in a chair, and I'm crunching on trail mix, but I'm getting words out, and that's okay. That's that season. So that's kind of how it is for me.
Yeah, and I totally agree on the seasonal thing and just not guilting yourself. I had a lot of guilt in the beginning years about, oh, I didn't write today, and it's extremely important to take it seriously and to say,
Yeah.
okay, I'm a writer, I'm going to do this and
Hmm.
put in the proper amount of time that you need to, but you also need to be very gentle with yourself because
Yeah.
if you're a writer, you're more of a sensitive soul anyhow, and we don't need that extra guilt because we already put so much of that on
Hmm.
ourselves as it is.
Yeah.
So I think
Yeah.
you have to make it work for you. Hmm.
Yeah. And recognizing that, yeah, right, that writers are sensitive souls, and that there are seasons that we go through, and that it's not going to go away. That urge to write, and that story that's in your head, and opportunity, it's not going anywhere. So if right now things are bad, and you I have to take care of this emergency that's going on, then you do that, and feel confident that your story's not going to leave you.
Hmm.
It's going to be there when you come back to it.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I also agree with what you said because as moms, it is there's such a temptation, thinking, oh, the dishes and the laundry and all this stuff. And I, like you, often have to say, no, I'm not going to do that until 3 p.m. or,
Yeah. Yeah.
1:30 until I get these so many words. So I think just discipline, being gentle, and making sure that you are feeding that creative side of yourself because it is so important. And there will never be a magical time when you have it all together and you can write.
Still waiting for that. I'm
Right.
totally waiting to have it all together.
Right.
Hasn't happened yet.
No, not at all. So another question that we had, someone wanted to know, do artists create oil paintings for covers still? Kind of what is that process like? And can we see our sales in real time? So as far as covers, we do have cover artists, but typically everything is, computer done these days. So that has been my experience. And
My cover artist actually uses models, and he does the photography himself, and then he puts them in the computer and works his magic. So that's how it's done, and he's amazing.
yes, and a lot of magic it is. If you've been on my Facebook author page, you'll see the model that we started out with for Within the Veil and how she became Fea. She had blonde hair first that became red and totally just turned her into a gypsy. And Steve Gardner at Pixelworks Studios is an absolute genius artist and did so many wonderful things with her. So
Yes,
yeah, and your cover is fantastic. I love that too.
we got lucky. We both have excellent cover artists.
And as far as can we see real sales, if you are traditionally published with a publishing house, you can't. It's typically a couple months before you'll get your sales report by email or mail, and then you'll get to see how things went there. You'll see your sales and if there were any returns and just all that information there. If you are an indie author, you do get to see your sales in real time, and that's really fun because you get to go on Author Central in Amazon, and you can pretty much see real time, if not up to about the half hour, of things that have sold in Kindle or paperback. So that's really fun. Okay, so I think the last writer question we have was somebody who was interested to know about what do we think about the more edgy topics being addressed in Christian fiction, or our take on edgy Christian fiction. I am an edgy writer, but I don't start out being that way. I just want to write real, authentic stories, and my stories they just organically happen that way. And I never start out thinking, oh, I'm going to write about, this issue or this thing or that thing. I just think, okay, I want to write about gypsies and I want to write a romance, and I'll get flashes of who they are and I'll write about that. And then when I get to that point, then I'll get more flashes of who they are and what they should go through. So.
Yeah, I don't write Christian fiction. I write general market fiction. So my take is, like you said, yeah, I don't start out with, oh, I'm going to write it about an issue. Oh, I'm going to go to this place or that place. It kind of happens. And I think that you need to follow the story and be honest with the story, be honest with your characters, let them make mistakes that they make. Don't be afraid to let them get into the trouble that the story is kind of heading towards, because this is a story about a person, hopefully, who makes mistakes, who gets in trouble, who, has obstacles that they're going to overcome, and to kind of hold back and say, oh, I'm worried for my character, I'm not going to let this happen. If you're worried for your character, that's a good thing. Your readers are going to be worried too. And chances are, maybe in their life at some point, they're going to come up against something that your character faces. And they're going to have that in the back of their mind, that your character went through this and made this decision or made that decision. And especially for young readers, it's really important to be able to experience something within the pages of fiction where it is safe and they have an opportunity where they're not full of emotion or full of adrenaline or full of whatever, to think about, well, what would I do in this situation? What choice would I make? Gray made this choice. I don't think I agreed with that. Or, this is what I would do if I was in that situation. That's really, really valuable. And, to shy away from that is to not give them some experience and some thought that's going to prepare them, for things that they may face in their life. So
Yeah,
That's kind of my approach.
right. I think that is so important, and I completely agree with that too. Just giving teens that safety to work through the issues on the page and not in
Yeah.
their own life. You know, it's the old adage about learn from other people instead of your own experiences, you know, the school of hard knocks
Yeah.
sort of thing. So, and if that's where your
Yeah.
story is taking you, you know, that's what needs to be written. And
Mm-hmm.
definitely I never start out trying to put a spiritual arc into my books. They just organically show up. I never
Mm.
really plan for that initially in the story. I just write the story and I just figure out who they are. And it's typically toward the end that bits and pieces of that will show up. And then I get to
Mm-hmm.
decide what I want to do with that. And then in the second or third draft, I may weave that back in toward the front. So that's typically just how I
Mm-hmm.
work. But I think it just comes down to you've got to write what that story that is just begging you to be written, that story that is just pulling on your soul, and write it as
Yeah.
authentically and as powerfully as you possibly can. And if you've read
Mm-hmm.
the Writer's Digest article about writing through fear, or the one that was recently on Secretville, if it doesn't scare you to write it, that you might need to reanalyze what you're doing, because if it doesn't scare you, you're not plumbing the depths of your soul and those emotional things that will be important, the things where you need to be transformed in your own life, and that will flow onto the page, and then your readers can be transformed. So just write good stories, and whatever happens in them, go for it.
That's my approach.
Right. So what book do you wish you could have written, or an author you admire?
Well, you and I agree on this. We sort of have a thing, a girl crush on Tahira Mafi,
Right,
a
absolutely.
writer crush, because her prose are just gorgeous. They're just the way her way with words is just unbelievable. So I love her. I also love A.G. Howard. I love her Alice. Her it's like weird and quirky and dark and creepy and but still beautiful and full of hope and full of good things. So yeah, her Splintered series, the Alice in Wonderland kind of retelling, is something that I wish I'd written.
That's awesome. An author that I really admire is Robert Morgan, and he writes a lot of Appalachian fiction. And to me, he's so just lyrical and evocative, and that's something that I try to do as a writer. And I just so enjoy reading his fiction. And he's just so funny and just about panthers and moonshine and just all sorts of randomness. And the
Not
North
moonshine.
in the North Carolina mountains, and I just love reading his stuff. And I grew up hearing a lot of those stories because my family was from Southern Ohio and Kentucky, and I lived in Warren, but when we would go visit family, we would go down there, and it was sort of like a different world, and a lot of that filtered over into the Cover Deep. I made Bianca from Portsmouth one of the places where I spent a lot of time, so that's one of the reasons why I like Robert Morgan. So next question is, what makes you nostalgic?
I was supposed to think about that and I forgot.
So
Uh,
what makes me nostalgic is
I
lightning
guess
bugs.
you get to go first.
Yeah, I'll go first while you think. Oh, you like owls though.
Yeah,
Owls,
but they don't exactly make me nostalgic for
yeah.
anything.
You once told me
I've never
about,
actually seen an owl other than at the zoo. I've
yeah.
never seen an owl in real life, so I'm trying to think of. Anyway, you go ahead. I'm thinking.
Yeah, you once told me about just the sound of a river. You remember that from your childhood?
Oh, yeah, that's so crazy. You remember what makes me nostalgic? Yeah, when I was like an early teen, we lived up in this mountain town, and there was a river behind where we lived, and I mean it was constant. The river was always there, obviously it didn't go anywhere, but the noise was constant. And then we moved down the mountain to a different city, and the first few nights living in this new city I couldn't sleep because there was no river. I was used to hearing the river, and yeah, it was just an adjustment. So I still love the rivers and up in the mountains in Colorado.
Yeah, they're so beautiful. So lightning bugs for me, it was a big thing as a child just to catch lightning bugs and to play tag in the dark. and things like that. So I love lightning bugs. And we don't have them in Florida that I know of. We didn't have them in Colorado. Recently went back to visit family in Ohio, and that's one of the things that I did. I ran around like a child, all crazy, just catching lightning bugs and holding them in my hand.
Why does that not surprise me at all?
You know, in my gypsy weirdness. You imagine me
bohemian ways.
Yeah. With scarves flowing and
right, yes, I'm sure it was beautiful and slightly insane looking.
Yeah. So, on the note of childhood, etc., what's the nerdiest thing you ever did in high school?
Oh, right, we were talking. I was in a bell choir. Oh yeah.
See, I don't even think that's nerdy at all.
You don't think that's okay? Then you didn't see us play. It was nerdy, and yeah. So every once in a while, my husband played the accordion, and I didn't. I mean, we didn't know each other in high school, but so every once in a while, I give him a hard time about how he played the accordion, and he's like, you were in a bell choir. So yeah, I went to tiny school up in the mountains, and yep, giant nerds.
But you're talking to someone who in high school listened to Mozart's Requiem frequently. Like the entire thing all the time in my drama and everything. But the nerdiest thing I did probably was that I wore a 1700s costume to prom or homecoming or some sort of high school affair like that.
Tell me there's a picture of this somewhere.
There's a picture, and I should probably share it just
You
for
probably should.
smile.
For posterity.
And I had my hair up in, you know, like the 1700s thing with the curls and yeah. So
okay, so I thought of another one. I once one of the few times that I tried to play D&D with my brother, I guess that we decided candles would be a good idea. And I don't know why, and I don't remember how, but I burned my big toe on a candle while playing D&D.
okay.
I think that's probably in the line for winning the prize of dorkiness. I don't remember why was my toe like near the flame? How did that? I don't know.
One can only speculate. I don't know, but
at this point.
On the note of maiming ourselves, what's the weirdest scar that you have and how did you get Is that your answer for that question?
That is not my answer for that question. I have a scar on my shin that I got as a child because I dropped my bunny and the bunny like grabbed my leg like on the way down. I assumed to like slow his fall, poor thing. And it didn't work and he was fine. But I have a little like smiley face, kind of not a smiley face, just like the smile on my shin to this day from a bunny bite.
Crazy. So I was thrown from a workhorse as a teen. A friend and I decided that we were going to sneak back in the woods to this particular farm where there were these beautiful workhorses, and we climbed the fence, and of course I got on the back of one.
Of course, as you do.
Yeah. It seemed totally legit. It was like a Clydesdale, right? I mean, it was.
Oh my god! I think I'll ride that thing.
Right, exactly. You know, I had to do, you know, pretending I was this princess or something like that.
Did you have the long flowing gown? Was this
I wasn't wearing any costume during this time.
Oh man!
Let's just clarify. So anyhow, I was thrown from said horse into a barbed wire fence. And I have a scar on my left knee from that experience. Now, another time, I was pretending to be a mermaid. And
of course you were.
I was at some amusement park. I don't know what was like Cedar Point or something like that, whatever what was up in Ohio. And they had this huge wave pool, and I had my ankles crossed, and I had the Great Mermaid tail going on, and I went to dive down, and the wave came at the wrong angle, and I hit my chin. I don't know if you can see it, probably not, but I have
can't see anything.
Yeah, I have this long white scar right here from
Oh,
pretending to be a mermaid. And then there's one more. It's right here on my arm, and it's kind of in the shape of a heart, oddly enough. But that happened on the day of the Cover Deed book launch when we had that huge party, and I burnt myself with my curling iron. So,
oh,
yeah, it's
yeah.
still here.
I have some curling iron scars.
Uh-huh.
Dangerous being a woman.
Yes. So now that you all, whoever is watching, have seen into our particular madness, if you want more of that madness, I suppose you can read our books. But
Yeah.
it's
Yep. If you dare.
there. It's been tons of fun talking with you. And we would be talking in person, but I had to move away, which she still hasn't forgiven me for.
Nope.
Nope.
Nope. Not my favorite choice of yours.
But we're dealing with it somehow. And
Yes.
and hanging out on Google Hangouts, talking books and life, weird scars, burns, and costumes and mythological creatures, amongst other things. So, ta ta, my dear.